Welcome back. It's Thursday, December 15th. Now officially 10 days away from Christmas. Hopefully everybody's happy and healthy. Safe to say I am, thankfully. But it is a weird week for me. As it's playoff time in most fantasy football leagues. One league I'm in, because I qualified for the playoffs in two leagues. So not where I want to be, but we're still doing okay. In one of the leagues, though, I have a bye week, right? So I don't have to touch that team for the entire week. So it's pretty weird because fantasy football is something that you check every day, right? It's one of those you check multiple times. So it feels like I have a lot of free time. But regardless, on tap today, we have our weekly NFL coverage. We're going to dive into each matchup, including some Saturday games, which we're going to get into just in a little bit. We're going to give our picks of the week, and we're going to maybe throw in some fantasy pickups for this week along the way, if there's any to note. But this is your early reminder to drop a like on the stream, subscribe to the channel if you're new, or if you haven't already, and turn those post notifications on, because we are posting at noon each and every week. But if you forget, YouTube will remind you. Without further ado, welcome to the Anomaly Podcast. I'm your host, Owen Stiftar. Let's see what Week 15 has to offer. Okay, first things first, we're going to actually look into the updated playoff standings on the AFC and NFC sides as we have the last couple weeks. The 1 through 4 seeds in the AFC, there's no change there. There's actually no change throughout the first 6 seeds in the AFC, as you see, but we're going to run through it. The number 1 through 4 seeds go as follows. We have the Buffalo Bills, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Baltimore Ravens, and the Tennessee Titans, even though they're on a 3-game losing streak. For the wildcard spots, the 5th seed is the Cincinnati Bengals, the 6th seed is the Miami Dolphins, and sneaking into the playoffs is the 7th seed New England Patriots. Like I said, they went up one spot in the first 5 seeds. The Philadelphia Eagles, they're the number 1 seed. Obviously, they're 12-1, have an amazing year. They're the first team to clinch the playoffs. The number 2 seed is the Minnesota Vikings. The 3 seed is the San Francisco 49ers. And the 4 seed is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Somehow, some way, they would have a home game come playoff time. It's funny how that stuff works. But the 5th seed is the Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, they look dominant. And they just so happen to be in a division with a 12-1 team. But for the 6th seed, the Washington Commanders, they're moving up 2 spots, even though they were on a bye week, taking the 6th seed in the NFC. And the 7th seed is the Giants, coming off of a loss. They're still in the playoffs. They're still at the 7th seed. They just fell down 1 spot. But now let's get into Thursday night, where we have the San Francisco 49ers at 9-4, going into Seattle to take on the 12-man and the Seahawks, who currently sit at 7-6. For San Francisco, the Brock Purdy hype, Mr. Irrelevant, it's alive and well. That hype is alive and well. But however, after suffering injuries to his ribs and his oblique last week, I believe on the second drive of the game. So San Fran can never keep their players healthy. And yet again, Brock Purdy, their 3rd string quarterback, was hurt last week on the second drive of the game against the Buccaneers. Right now, the game's obviously tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern. He's currently a game-time decision for tonight's game. The well-traveled veteran, Josh Johnson, who he's just one of those guys that always has a job. He is the backup, and he is on deck in case Brock Purdy weren't to play tonight. But Kyle Shanahan believes Brock Purdy will suit up as of right now, right? As of what we know right now, it is believed he will suit up. But like I said, if Purdy were to play, this would be his first career start on the road. And the 12-man in Seattle, it's not an easy place to play for veterans, is what I'm getting at. Let alone in your first career road start. So he proved me wrong. He proved me wrong last week. I can't talk now, but stick with me. Brock Purdy proved me wrong last week, taking down Tom Brady in his first career start. Maybe he could prove me wrong again, going into Seattle and his first road start and winning on the road there. But this 49ers team, as I mentioned earlier, they have injuries everywhere. They always do. They can never keep their players healthy in San Fran. But like I said, 2 weeks ago they had an injury to Deebo Samuel, their star receiver. It was an injury to his MCL on his ankle. He won't be good to go here for this game, obviously, right? But they're hoping to get him back sometime in the regular season. So in the next couple weeks, maybe we'll see Deebo make a return. For tonight's game, though, San Fran will also be missing their starting corner Tavarius Moore. He's a very athletic, freak corner, but he struggles from time to time. He's not an elite corner, right? But regardless, he is a starting corner, and he will be missing for tonight's game. So safe to say, with all these injuries that I just rambled about, San Fran will be shorthanded to say the least. Now, for the home team, the Seattle Seahawks, they're coming off of a disappointing loss last week against Carolina, of all teams. And with now being out of the playoff picture and their playoff hopes and aspirations on the line, they need a win here, and they need it badly. But however, for a team that loves to run the ball, we're talking about Seattle, they've struggled the last 4 weeks. Obviously Kenneth Walker, running back for the Seattle Seahawks, he's had his fair share of injuries in the recent weeks, and they've had some backup backs. But over the last 4 games, the Seahawks have only averaged about 50 to 60 rushing yards a game, which to no one's surprise, it's bottom 10 in the league, bottom 7 to be exact. And with facing an elite run defense in San Fran, it doesn't look like they're going to get their running game back on track here, right? Even though they're home. So it's safe to say that I believe Seattle's going to have to win this game through the air, which makes sense, saying that San Fran's a really good team, and to beat really good teams, sometimes you have to put up a lot of points. But like I said, if Brock Purdy for the Niners, if he plays this game, give me the injured 49ers to figure this game out. But however, if Josh Johnson is to start tonight, I'm recording this at early in the morning on Thursday, but if Josh Johnson is to start tonight, give me Seattle at home to improve to 8-6, right? Get back in the playoff mix. As we move to Saturday, not Sunday, but Saturday, we have 3 games on Saturday. We have, to start off, I believe this game is at noon. We have the 4-8-1 Indianapolis Colts going into Minnesota to take on the 10-3 Vikings. Like I said, this will be the first game on Saturday's slate. The Colts, we'll start with the road team here. They're coming off of a bye week. They're looking to break a 3-game losing streak, as I mentioned, under their interim head coach and Jeff Saturday. Under Jeff Saturday, as we take a step back and look at what he's done so far in his tenure, obviously he's looked good. He had that good first week, right, coming out with a win against the Raiders. But overall, under Jeff Saturday, I can't talk right now, but stick with me. Jonathan Taylor, he's looked good. To no one's surprise, when Jonathan Taylor gets the ball, he's going to look good. And Saturday's done. He's done just that. He's come in and gotten his playmakers the ball. Michael Pittman's looked better. Jonathan Taylor, obviously, as I mentioned, he's looked better. So the offense has looked better. But a lot of the struggles under Jeff Saturday has been the defense. They've allowed over 500 rushing yards and exactly 7 rushing touchdowns to opposing teams the last 3 weeks. So it's safe to say that their defense has struggled, even though they have a lot of talent on that side of the ball. But the struggles defensively aren't going to help them against an elite offense that the Minnesota Vikings do have star power all over. But for Minnesota, they're looking to bounce back as well. They're coming off of a loss last week against the Lions, as you can imagine, since they're 10-3. After every single loss they've had this season, they bounced back with multiple wins in a row. I don't expect that to change here at home against Indy. They're playing a defense that's statistically struggled this season. And with Justin Jefferson, the star power Justin Jefferson, with Dalvin Cook playing a rush defense that is terrible the last month or so, I feel like the Minnesota comes out, they get up early, and they're going to win pretty easily at home with Dalvin Cook having a big day for the Vikings. Next matchup is going to be the 9-4 Baltimore Ravens going into Cleveland to take on the 5-8 Browns. The biggest question for Baltimore in this game is who's going to be the quarterback, right? No one's surprised. Who's going to be the quarterback? Lamar Jackson, obviously, we think he's their franchise quarterback. they need to sign him in the offseason. But with Lamar Jackson still dealing with the injury he had, he's out, and Tyler Huntley suffering a concussion last week. Typically this season, if a quarterback goes under concussion protocol, he typically misses the next week of football, right? But he is actually somehow going to be the first quarterback to be on track to play the next week after concussion protocol, or after Tyler Huntley was placed under concussion protocol. He's actually on pace to play this game against the Browns today, it's hard to believe, but it's a possibility, right? However, if Tyler Huntley isn't able to play tonight, we will see third string rookie quarterback Anthony Brown for the Baltimore Ravens. I believe he's out of Oregon. Don't quote me on that. Do not quote me on that. But Anthony Brown, rookie, he would be the quarterback if Huntley were to stay under concussion protocol. Regardless of who we see, though, the Ravens are going to be the Ravens. They're going to run the ball early and often, and they're going to play at their own pace. And good thing for the Ravens, the Browns haven't been able to stop the run the majority of this season, or in recent memory. But the Browns they've struggled to stop the run. That's the Ravens' strength. So regardless of who's quarterback, they should be able to play to their strengths, is what I'm getting at. But for the Browns, the home team, it's Deshaun Watson's first home start as a member of the Cleveland Browns. And us Browns fans are hoping for a cleaner game in the air from Deshaun Watson. But again, there's going to be that adjustment period that I've talked about with Deshaun Watson, saying that he hasn't played for 700 plus days before the last 2 weeks. And in my opinion, if that rust were to show yet again this week against the Ravens, hopefully it's the last week that we see this rust. Regardless, the Browns should be able to beat either quarterback in this game. If it's Tyler Huntley, if it's Anthony Brown, if Lamar Jackson somehow suits up for tonight's game, wouldn't surprise me. With those quarterbacks being injured and young, the Browns should be able to pull off this win regardless. Next up, we have probably the most exciting Saturday matchup, which is an AFC East showdown. We have the 8-5 Miami Dolphins going into Buffalo to take on the 10-4 number 1 seed Buffalo Bills. For Miami, they're the road team here. The biggest question is how healthy would Tyreek Hill be for this ball game? Obviously, last week against the Chargers, he had an ankle injury. He hasn't been ruled out yet, but he is questionable for for Saturday's game against the Bills. But Miami's offense in a lot of their games, the reason why they lose is that their offense struggles, right? It's either they're 100% and they're killing everybody, putting up 30 to 40 points a game, or they just struggle like they did last Sunday night against the Chargers, where it wasn't pretty all game long for the Dolphins side of things, right? Despite the amazing play from Tyreek, where if you haven't watched the play, go ahead and watch it. It was in the second quarter, I believe, of the Miami Dolphins Chargers game last week, where the Raheem Mostert, running back for the Miami Dolphins, he fumbled the ball. Everybody's trying to grab it, and the ball somehow finds its way out of the pile into the fastest man in the NFL. The ball found its way into Tyreek Hill's hands, is what I'm getting at. And he ran for about 60, 70 yards, scored a touchdown for the Dolphins. And even that didn't spark the offense. So despite that play, they couldn't get much going. And they are on a 2-game losing streak. So this is a big game for them. They're playing in Buffalo, where the forecast right now says that there's going to be heavy snow. We're going to have a couple inches of snow. So you got to think that goes in Buffalo's favor. But we'll get to Buffalo in a second. For Miami, they need this win. Right now, they are in the playoff picture, but they need this win to get to 9-5, and these last 3 games won't be as stressful as it would be if they were to lose this game, right? But for Buffalo, they're looking to get some payback here against the Dolphins, who beat them in week 3, so a long time ago, but they're looking to get some payback, right? But like I mentioned, the forecast is heavy snow. You got to think that plays into Buffalo's favor, saying they practice in that weather. But for Josh Allen's career, obviously, this Dolphins team hasn't always been this good. Josh Allen is 4-0 with 10 touchdowns and 2 interceptions against the Dolphins in his career at home. So Josh Allen loves to play this team in the snow. to say the least. I believe Buffalo does win this one after it is a relatively close first half. I could see Buffalo maybe getting out to a 10 or so point lead in the first half. Then they explode in the third quarter. Stephon Diggs hasn't had a game in about a month. Expect this to be a Stephon Diggs game. Moving on to Sunday, we have the 12-1 Philadelphia Eagles going into Chicago and Soldier Field to take on the 3-10 Bears. The biggest thing to watch in this game is going to be the quarterback matchup between Jalen Hurts and Justin Fields. Those two guys alone, they're worth the ticket price, and they should be able to produce more than enough highlight plays to entertain the fans throughout this blowout of a game. But we're going to start with the Bears. They're coming off of a bye week. They've had plenty of time to prepare for this high-powered Eagles offense and the 32 different Batmans that they have on their team. But I don't know how much that will help. Probably not much at all, right? Saying that this Bears team is 3-10. They're on a 6-game losing streak. Over these last 6 games, they've allowed over 33 points a game. So that's not going to help them much here, right? Against the number 1 team in football and the 12-1 Eagles. I believe this one gets ugly early, unless Justin Fields has another Superman type performance. Give me Philly on the road to take down the Bears, man. Go to 13-1, no surprise there. Next up, we have an NFC South matchup. We have the 5-8 Atlanta Falcons going into the Silverdome, I believe, to take on the 4-9 New Orleans Saints. Believe it or not, with those records and with Tampa Bay's loss last week, these two teams are still technically in the playoff hunt. Obviously, more specifically, they have a chance to win their division, right? But for this matchup, the Falcons are turning to their rookie out of Cincinnati, Desmond Ridder, at quarterback after the bye week. And, well, let me clear. Okay, so like I said, the Falcons are coming off of a bye week, and with the recent struggles, saying that they're on a 2-game losing streak. And Marcus Mariota, if you haven't heard, he's practically quit on the Falcons team. He's no longer with them for the rest of the season. I will say, he did just have a baby, so that could play a part in him stepping down, I guess, in a way, from the team. But regardless, it's Desmond Ridder's team from here on out. Maybe he can spark a light under this team, and they can get something going here to get back in the playoff mix. But for the Saints, for how bad they've been this season, they're still 3-4 at home, which is subpar, but they're 3-4 at home. And Andy Dalton has 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions at home, so he plays his best football there. And like I said, 3 of their 4 wins have come at home. So, maybe that would lean you to New Orleans' favor here. But in my opinion, the tank is undeniable for the Saints at this point. They haven't tried to hide it, right? Them and the Texans, they haven't tried to hide it. They're trying to get a high pick. And even though this is Desmond Ridder's first start on the road against a tough Saints defense, or against a talented Saints defense, I believe Desmond Ridder and this run game of the Falcons can pull this game out, and they can pull out a win for Desmond Ridder's first career start. Next up, we're gonna have the 6-7 Detroit Lions going into New York to take on the 7-6 Jets. Like I said, this should be one of the most fun, but yet competitive games to watch all week long. The Jets, we'll start with them. They fell out of the playoffs last week with a loss, letting the Patriots jump in, but they still have a winning record. There's still only 1 game out, and when Mike White is in the offense, that team has life, right? Compared to when Zach Wilson or Joe Flacco were in. The team is exciting to watch. Before the Lions, they're winners of 2 straight, and, and last week they had that fun play where they threw it to Penei Sewell out the backfield, their offensive lineman, and Dan Campbell, coach of the Detroit Lions, went on Pat McAfee's show, and he basically admitted that he had no idea that play was coming because he couldn't hear the offensive coordinator. So that's pretty funny. But like I said, they're on a 2-game winning streak. They're still in the hunt for the NFC playoffs, and especially if they get a win here, they'd go to 500. still have a chance at 10 wins this season. But though Mike White, he should be healthy for this game against the Lions at home. Give me the team that's hot. Give me the team that can score in bunches. They're exciting to watch, and ultimately they have all of America behind them. That is the Lions. Give me the Lions on the road to go to 7-7 and make a push for these playoffs, man. I'm rooting for them, even though I'm not a Lions fan. But next up, we have the 5-8 Pittsburgh Steelers going into Carolina to take on the 5-8 Carolina Panthers. For Pittsburgh, the road team, Kenny Pickett, obviously he's supposed to be maybe not their franchise guy, but he's their guy for now. His status is uncertain after being put into concussion protocol, and as we mentioned earlier, if you're put into concussion protocol, you most likely miss the following week of football, right? But with Mitch Trubisky, their backup quarterback, stepping in last week, and he threw 3 interceptions. So let's just say he didn't have a good game. The Steelers could turn to their third string backup and Cleveland's favorite quarterback, Mason Rudolph. So it'll be interesting to see who Pittsburgh decides to go with at quarterback in this game. I would expect Trubisky to start if Pickett were to be out, but worst comes to worst, they could always go to Mason Rudolph and have Mitch Trubisky on a short leash. But hopefully Najee Harris is back and he's 100% for this week. Obviously, last week he wasn't fully ready to go, but hopefully he's back to 100% this week on the road against Carolina, which should be a running matchup, right? Both teams should just be running pretty much for the majority of the game. And for what it means, I shout out to StatMuse because that's the site I use for a lot of the stats that I find. But for what it means, the Pittsburgh Steelers are 6-0 in the last 6 matchups they're 6-0 against Carolina in their last 6 games, right? I'll put it that way. But for Carolina, the home team here, they picked up a huge win last week against Seattle. A lot of people didn't have them winning, but they ran their way to victory. And like I said, ever since Steve Wilks stepped up as the interim head coach, they've stuck to an identity. And all good teams have an identity. Not saying that Carolina's good, but good teams have an identity, right? And ever since Steve Wilks has stepped up as the Carolina head coach, their identity has been to run the ball early and often, basically as much as humanly possible. That's been their strategy. And though I don't believe in Sam Darnold, and though I don't believe that Sam Darnold can outplay a Mike Tomlin led defense, but with no Kenny Pickett, you know, and the quarterback struggles for the Pittsburgh Steelers that I'm assuming that they're going to have in this game, give me the Panthers at home with Deontay Foreman, Chuba Hubbard. Give me the Panthers at home to keep their playoff hopes alive. And who knows? I mean, if they win this game, they go to 6-8. I believe Carolina controls their own destiny to this point because they beat Tampa earlier in the year. I believe if Carolina were to win out and if they went 9-8, they would be in the playoffs. So it would be fun to see Carolina in the playoffs. Next up, we're going to have the 10-3 Dallas Cowboys going on the road into Jacksonville to take on the 5-8 Jacksonville Jaguars. This should be one of the most fun games of the week. High scoring, but unfortunately, this could also be one of the most disappointing games of the week because you never really know about this Jaguars team, specifically this Jaguars offense, right? Sometimes they come out and they'll look electric, and Zay Jones and Christian Kirk will kill it. They'll go for 30 points. But other weeks, like you saw a couple weeks ago against the Lions, they'll put up like 10 or 13 points a week. So it's very bipolar with this Jacksonville Jaguars offense. The biggest question, I guess, is what offense are we going to see in this matchup, right? But the Jacksonville Jaguars coach, Doug Peterson, he in his career, he's 4-7 against the Cowboys as a head coach. Obviously, he was with the Eagles for a long time from 2016 to 2020, brought them a Super Bowl. But in that time span, he was 4-7 against the Cowboys. This will be the 12th matchup in his career against the Cowboys. So it'll be interesting to see if that will translate to a new team, right? But speaking of Dallas, this Dallas team is trending towards another high seed in the NFC playoffs. As I mentioned earlier, They and on any regular season, they would be the 1 or 2 seed in the NFC, but the Philadelphia Eagles are 12-1, right? So the Dallas Cowboys might end up having the best record as a 5 seed, uh, since the NFL playoffs has expanded to 7 total teams in each conference. But over these last 4 games, this 4-game winning streak that they're on, they've averaged a nice 420 yards per game. Uh, I'm not making that up. I wish I was, but they're averaging 420 yards per game over the last 4 weeks. So they've looked amazing, passing, running, defense, all facets of the game. They've looked great, and no surprise here. I believe Dak Prescott and the Dallas defense, they keep finding ways to win, and maybe this is another game where Zeke and Tony Pollard just carry this Dallas offense to 11-3. Give me Dallas on the road. Next up, we're gonna have the 10-3 number 2 seed Kansas City Chiefs going into Houston to take on the 1-11-1 Houston Texans. We don't have to spend much time on this one at all. Sure, the Texans led for most of the game last week against the Cowboys, but this is Kansas City. This is not the Dallas Cowboys. And with the Texans tanking anyway, I believe Kansas City and Pat Mahomes are going to use this. They're going to use this game to bounce back from a bad offensive performance last week where Pat Mahomes threw 3 interceptions. They're going to use this game to bounce back. They're going to score early often. They're going to get up big early, and it's going to be a blowout, to say the least. But next up, we're going to move to the 4 o'clock games where we're going to have the 4-9 Arizona Cardinals going into Mile High to take on the 3-10 Denver Broncos. This is probably the most ugly game of the week. No surprise, with both teams being sub 500 and by a good margin at least, right? But on top of that, with both teams being sub 500, both teams' starting quarterbacks are going to be out with injury, right? The headline here is going to be Colt McCoy for the Arizona Cardinals versus Brett Rypien for the Denver Broncos. Both teams have had extremely messy seasons, right? You can tell by that first sentence alone. And with both backups starting in this game, it's going to be hard to go against the Broncos defense, which has been the lone bright spot in Denver. But over in Colt McCoy's time with the Arizona Cardinals over the last 2 or 3 years or so, he's found ways to step up and win ball games. Sure, he didn't do it last week against the Patriots, but I believe with a full week of prep, I believe Colt McCoy's going to do it again. I believe on the back of James Conner and DeAndre Hopkins, I believe Colt McCoy can he can squeak out a win here on the road in Denver. Maybe on a late game field goal. It is hard to go against Denver's defense though. Next up, we're going to have the 7-6 New England Patriots going into Las Vegas to take on the 5-8 Raiders. This is going to be a fun game, but more so because of the coach storyline, right? Josh McDaniels, he's going to get a shot at his mentor, Bill Belichick, and the Raiders, they're coming off of a Thursday night game, so they're going to have a rest advantage. Maybe we see Darren Waller in this matchup, but probably not knowing Darren Waller, right? But the loser of this game is most likely out of the AFC playoff hunt. They're most likely out of the playoff picture. And for that reason, I'm going to take New England on the road here with this new version of Mac Jones. He's more confident than ever, and he's finally sick of the let's throw 30 screens and run the ball 30 times every single game. So I'm looking for Mac Jones to maybe take a step up in his play and his production. And with the dominant defense of New England, especially knowing that they have Cincinnati coming to town next weekend, give me New England, man. Give me New England in this tough defense to pull it out against the Raiders. And in the one league, side note here, in the one league that I do have Davante Adams on my fantasy team, I am so happy I have a bye, right? Even though it's weird that I'm not checking my fantasy lineups almost every day, Davante Adams is going to be facing this Patriots defense, and he's going to be double teamed practically every play. So for all those reasons that I've said, New England and Bill Belichick, they get the best of the former assistant coach and this Las Vegas team. Give me New England on the road to improve to 8-6. Next up, we're going to have the 7-6 Tennessee Titans going into Los Angeles to take on the 7-6 Chargers. The Titans, they're on a 3-game losing streak as we speak, and a big reason is because their defense hasn't forced a turnover in the last 4 games, right? And plus, they have no passing attack whatsoever. So, no passing attack, no defensive pressure or turnovers being forced. It's not a recipe for winning, right? Especially in today's game. But with them being on a 3-game losing streak, you got to wonder if they are or if they already have gotten too comfortable with the lead that they have because their division is so terrible, right? I mean, Jacksonville is 5-8, New England or not New England, but Indy is 4-8-1, and Houston, we don't talk about Houston, right? So they already have like a 2-game advantage. Have they gotten too comfortable? That's a big question here we have to ask about Tennessee. But they're playing a Chargers team that can't stop the run. They haven't been able to in the last couple of years. They might be yet again without Joey Bosa in this upcoming week, which if Joey Bosa's out, obviously that's more the merrier for Derrick Henry. This Titans team loves to run the ball anyway. They're playing a team that's subpar against the run. I believe Tennessee, if they're going to win this game, they have to control the clock and they have to keep it on the ground, right? No surprise, they play to their strengths. But for the Chargers, they're starting to click. You could see that in the last couple of weeks with a big win last week against the Miami Dolphins. You can see that they're finally starting to click now that their receivers are healthy. Obviously, we're talking about Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. So now that their offense is healthy, they're starting to look better on both sides of the ball, weirdly enough. And with the offense being healthy, that's going to put a lot of stress on a lot of teams, right? But especially Tennessee in this matchup because Tennessee is 31st against the pass in the NFL, so they're second to last in the league against a team that loves to pass the ball. So this game, a lot of arrows point towards the Chargers side of things, right? They're home, they have all the advantages for the way that they want to play, but I believe, I believe the Chargers, it's just a fate thing, right? The last couple of years they just can't escape mediocrity, and I don't think that they're going to be able to escape 500 in this game either. I believe Tennessee, they go on the road in Los Angeles and they control the clock. Derrick Henry has a big game and they finally get back in the win column. Chargers fall to 7-7, not escaping mediocrity. But next up, we have the 9-4 Cincinnati Bengals, who are on a 5-game winning streak, going into Tampa Bay to take on the 6-7 struggling Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But the headline here is this is the first head-to-head matchup here between Joe Burrow and Tom Brady, so that's going to be fun. That's going to grab the headlines. But the real story, however, to me, is how underrated this Bengals defense has been the last month or so, right? This Bengals defense has only allowed exactly 16 and a half points a game over the last 3 weeks, playing against the Titans, who have an elite running attack, the Chiefs, we know how elite their offense is, and the Cleveland Browns, who we know how elite their running attack is. So this Bengals team, they've been elite the last month or so, and they're on a 5-game winning streak for a reason. Their defense has been amazing, and their offense, we know how deadly it can be. And I believe their offense this week, it only gets stronger because T. Higgins only played 1 snap last week. He will be back. Tyler Boyd should be back. So they're going to be at full strength with their defense playing amazing. They're doing exactly what they did last year. They're starting to pick up pace when it matters the most, and that's right before playoff time. So they're 9-4, 5-game winning streak, and they're hot right before the playoffs start. They're doing exactly what they did last season. But in this matchup, though I love to, though I'd love to see Tom Brady get his final playoff run, right, and maybe go out with the Super Bowl, even though he doesn't need one. I'd love to see that division, the NFC South, get more and more competitive because, I mean, let's face it, who doesn't love a Week 18, you know, divisional matchup? Whoever wins gets in the playoffs. I love those type of games, and for that reason, for my selfishness, give me Cincy on the road to improve to 10-4, and they might look like the most dangerous team in football after this week. Next up, we have a moving off to Sunday night. There we go. We have an NFC East matchup here. Very important matchup. Tons of implications on the line in this NFC bout. But these two teams, the 7-5-1 New York Giants are going to Washington to take on the 7-5-1 Commanders. Like I said, these two teams they tied 2 weeks ago, which is a very underrated game. When we look after the season, when we look back at the season, we're probably going to be like, oh, it's a tie, whatever. But it was a very underrated game. That game, I watched the I watched the majority of the game, right? Obviously, I had it on Red Zone. But that overtime, I believe both teams touched the ball 4 or 5 times. They both made deep drives, and it was just mistake after mistake at the end of each drive. But it was a fun game to watch nonetheless. Before the Commanders, they're coming off of a bye week, and they're facing a Giants team that's lost 3 of the last 4 weeks. So a Giants team that was once 6-2 or 6-1, I believe. They're now 7-5-1, so they're fading. And this Giants team has also allowed over 420 yards a game the last 3 weeks. So their defense is struggling, their offense is struggling, they're not healthy. Like I said, they're fading, right? But for the Commanders, their defense needs to figure it out. You know, obviously the health of Chase Young is going to be a question for the remainder of the season. And their offense, it's been surprising all season. I think it continues to be surprising. The duo of Taylor Heinicke, Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson, if you want to put it in there, and Terry McLaurin. I believe those 3 to 4 guys are going to find a way to get a win here, despite the health of this Commanders defense. Commanders figured out at home to get a very big win, a very big win as we close out this season. But next up, we have a Monday night matchup between the 4-9 Los Angeles Rams going into Lambeau Field to take on the 5-8 Green Bay Packers. For the Rams, they're coming off of one of the most surprising games / wins of the year, right? They signed Baker Mayfield last Tuesday, and 2 days later, a week ago today, he steps in and he led a 98-yard game-winning drive, getting I'm not gonna say a much needed win, but he stepped in and he got a win for this Rams team. He got a much needed win for himself, right? But as a Browns fan, I'm happy for Baker Mayfield. And who knows? What if Stafford doesn't get that spinal cord surgery this off season? If he doesn't get that surgery, he might be forced to retire. That's at least the speculations with Adam Schefter. If Stafford doesn't get that surgery, he might be forced to retire, which would mean Baker could step right in and he could take control of this Rams team for the next couple years. He could be the next guy for the Los Angeles Rams and this offense. But however, at the same time, as a Browns fan, I also remember last year around Christmas time when Baker went to Lambeau. It was a must-win situation, and he threw 4 interceptions. So, so I don't know which version of Baker Mayfield we're going to get in this game. I do believe he gets humbled, saying that the Packers are coming off of a bye week, and they've won the last 4 games against the Rams. So the Packers do have some type of a strategy, right, that they like. But I believe Baker gets humbled in this matchup, and I believe Aaron Rodgers keeps Green Bay's playoff hopes alive. Technically Green Bay is not mathematically eliminated as of now, but I mean, they could still end with 9 wins, and in 9 or 10 wins, you're always going to be on the playoff, on the fringe of the playoffs. Anything can happen at that point, right? I believe Aaron Rodgers, they pick up a much needed win at home to humble Baker Mayfield and this Rams team. Next up on your screen, you're going to see our picks of the week, what we did last week, what we're doing this week, and our overall season record. Obviously, you see last week we struggled. We struggled. Coming off of a 13-win week and a 12-win week, we fall all the way to a 6-win week. I got way too ahead of myself, I guess. Got way too confident, right? But as you see, we're going to run through our matchups on the right side of your screen. I'll run through my winners. On Thursday, tonight, I have San Francisco winning. For Saturday's games, I have Minnesota, Cleveland, and Buffalo. On Sunday, I have a lot of road teams winning. which could be a mistake, but I'm willing to take that risk. On Sunday, we have Philadelphia, New Orleans, Detroit, Carolina, Dallas, Kansas City, Arizona, New England, Tennessee, Cincy, and Washington to close out Sunday. On Monday night, I have the Packers, as we just talked about, taking home the win. I do see a mistake here in this graphic. I do believe that Atlanta will win that game. So ignore that X over the New Orleans Saints and put it over on Atlanta. Even though Desmond Ridder's making his first career start, right? But that would mean that I only have two home teams winning on Sunday, which, like I said, is a big mistake. Probably a big mistake, but I'm willing to take that risk. Regardless, we have to bounce back from the 6-7 week. I believe we do that, and rather easily here this week, as I'm trying to get up to 70% before the Super Bowl concludes. I'm trying to get up to 70%. But that's going to do it for today's show. Right now, we're currently only at around 40 minutes, so I didn't keep you guys too long today. It was a little longer than I wanted, but we do what we got to do, right? We adapt. Regardless, though, I will see you guys next Tuesday with our regular basketball weekly shows. Obviously, next Thursday, where if you're unaware or if you missed Tuesday's show, we are moving towards a 12 o'clock posting time for Tuesday and Thursdays. So if you don't have those post notifications on, go ahead and turn those on. If you guys haven't liked the stream, go ahead and do that now, please. And go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you're new, or if you haven't already. There's so many times I watch YouTube channels that I enjoy. I just forget to hit the subscribe button, right? So go ahead and do that if you haven't already. Like I said, I'll see you guys on Tuesday. Good luck to all of your fantasy football teams, especially if you're in the playoffs this weekend. Good luck to your real life teams this weekend. And I will see you guys on Tuesday. Stay happy, stay healthy as best you can. And until Tuesday, peace, love, and hugs. Enjoy your weekend. I'm out.